Hello and welcome. My name is Christophe Clermont and I will talk about text form fields today. Text form fields are actually the simplest ways of using form fields, so it's definitely the start to get familiar with this concept. So let's start. When we go to the form fields tab, where I'm actually on here, it's the last tab in the range of resources. The first hurdle to overcome and to understand is the difference between template and document form fields. That only counts if you have multiple documents in place, and template form fields are valid across all the documents. Document form fields are only valid in the current selected document. So let me maybe just have a look at the menu board example. Let me just go in the first document and delete everything. So we got this board here, and this board has lots of document form fields. There are actually no template form fields here. So they are local to that certain board. So if I go to the first document and drag on a board, then this board has these form fields. So what I can do is I'm actually dragging on a second board. And if I go to the buyer side, I now can change the color of the laminate different for the first and for the second occurrence here. So that is the reason why we have these document form fields, which are now just named after the document where we are in. So we got board here, we got the board form fields. I hope I could give you an idea. So let's forget about that. Right now, what we mostly use are template form fields. So form fields which are just available everywhere. So when I click on the plus here, I'd be able to add a new form field. So let's call it the name. So what I get is actually a form field name with a standard value test. So I can change the standard value to whatever I want. If I want to use this form field, I can use it fairly easily in both kinds of text. So we got single line text and we got multi-line text. The usage is a little bit different. So when we are on single line text, you need to go to the right hand side here. So don't use the inline editing for that, but use instead the editing on the right hand side. Just delete whatever is in the field, right click and say form.name should be in that text field. So you always get the menu here with the available form fields. So super easy to put them in. If you do the same thing here with a multi-line text field, you just can do it with multi-line. So I can say hello, and now it's a little bit different. So if you press the $sign, automatically the menu opens where you can select from the form field. In that case, form.name. Let me make the text a little bit bigger so we can see this, and the frame maybe as well. So these are the two ways how you can use form fields in text in your document. So when we switch to the buyer side, we got this form field automatically exposed, and we can say hi there. This of course works in both views for the buyer side. So when we go to buyer side appearance and we change this to create a photo product, we still will see the form field in the settings tab over here. And we can change this to another name. And you might already have seen that the interesting thing is that, so this is the idea of form field. So I got one kind of form field or variable, which is actually distributed to many places of my document. And that's very helpful because this data also comes from outside Printess. So when the editor opens, it can take over the names, for example, from your current data record, so that people find their names pre-populated in a business card, or some configuration data from the shop is automatically distributed to a form field, like the color of a t-shirt or a mug. So one of the common mistakes people make when using form field is getting confused between the content in the text frame, which is now coming from the form field, with the content of the text frame, which the user can enter. So let's just select text content also for this frame, which will actually, you should never do. I do it to explain you how bad this goes. So because what do we have now? We have the instruction for Printess that the user is able to change the text frame content. And we also have the instruction that the text frame content should come from a form field, which is problematic because right now, when I switch to the buyer side and I have not selected any frame, I still be able to change my form field and my name appears in the frame. But now I can also click on the frame. And Printess automatically, because it knows there's something going on with the form field, doesn't show me inline editing, but shows me editing here as a text input box. So when I change this to Susan, it will work because I now have a selected frame and I'm changing the text of the selected frame. But the reality is, if I deselect the frame, I see that the form field still has the name Christoph and Susan is in the text frame, which is now decoupled. That's the reason why you see this editable element here as well. So whatever I do here, I am decoupled from my form field, which means that this is now populating to the second frame, but not to the first frame at all. And this can get fairly easy, super confusing. So please always think about where should the content come from. Should it come from a form field? Do it and actually place the form field in the text frame, or should the buyer be able to edit this frame inline, then turn on the content? But don't do both. That will actually always lead to misconfigured documents. You might now say that there are scenarios where I do want to have form fields in a text that's editable. And this is actually possible. So when we are looking on the multi-line text frame where this normally happens, so let's say we want to have a user to write a letter. Hello, I am, and I want to blah, blah. So whatever, that should be the sales letter here. And now I got the name of the customer, which is actually coming from a database. So we want the salespeople to change the content of the letter, but we don't want to change them or to remove that Mario, that name form field. So that's what we can do. So for multi-line text, there is definitely a meaning in saying the text should be editable. So let me do that. So what happens? When I simply click text content on here and switch to the buyer side, I am still able, by the way, I show you, I can still change the name. It's now Christoph. If I go to the text frame, and then you realize that when I type in here, it shows me Christoph. So there is no form field anymore. It's kind of resolved. It works until I edit the first time, which, yeah, I can now just put some text to it. But now if I change the form field to AAA, whatever, it doesn't change in the frame. So that's actually the expected scenario. This is used for pre-filling text. So let's say you have a photo product and you want in the photo product you want to have the name or the please enter your name text, and you pass this from a database, and it should be there in the first moment. But when the user clicks on it, the user should be able to change this text entirely. That's the reason why this behavior is actually working like that. So you can use form fields for the first population, but once the user started editing the text, their changes are overwriting the form field, which is a valid scenario for multi-line text, more than for single-line text. Okay, but now coming back to the sales letter, we need to keep the form field because later on the database comes and the 500 names goes into that letter. So what we can do is we can click Keep Form Fields here. If we check this, then the form fields are not resolved, but instead they are kept. So when I'm starting editing the multi-line text here, I cannot select this field. I cannot write in it. My cursor is jumping over it. I'm able to select the field. I'm able to see my form field over here. I'm even able to move this around. But most importantly, I'm able to write text in here and continue working on my text. Whereby still, if I'm leaving my editing mode, I can type another name here or Maria, and it's still in the text frame. So this is the beauty of that feature, that I'm able to preserve my form fields in the text frame. I think this is all the basics about using form fields in text. There is more when we look in the form field properties itself. So opening this dialog could be a little kind of frightening because it has so many options here. I will go time over some of these options, but for now, let's have a look on the most interesting ones. So we got the name of the form field, which is name. That should be only letters, only alphanumeric characters. You're not allowed to put hyphens in there or something like that. But therefore you have the label where you can say your name, or you can maybe do that in different languages. So if I do so and I go back to the buyer side, I will see that this has now a different caption here, your name. The data type for text form fields is normally always string. So there are other form field types where we can talk about, but for text form fields, you always leave it to string, which actually means text. And then you got different user interfaces here. And this is quite interesting because even for text form fields, there is a lot of user interfaces, which makes a lot of sense. So let's go, instead of the text box, which shows me just a text box to enter the text, to a select list. So let's say I can select from a range of values, like let's say some color names, blue and green and red. So now I have a kind of a closed list of available values. If I do this, I now get a select list here, and on the buyer side as well, I got this select list. I just saw I wrote road, which should be red in English, but there is a lot of columns more here, and this is a super handy thing if you want to build logic up, because you can use all these label info columns. For the label column, of course, it's important to say I want to show that in German. So let's say this is blau, and now we got grün and we got rot. So we show the color names in German. Nevertheless, we write them in English to our document. So I can select green or grün, and I got green. I can select blau, and I got blue here. But you can do much more. You can say, I can just use meter one. There are a lot of columns. It's on your disposal. Just do what you want. But you can build logic with that. So let's say blue in the ocean. And we have green on the meadow. And we got red, I don't know where, on the meadow. We got red, I don't know where. I don't know. So this is now a selection of 3 sentences fitting my 3 values. If I want to use this is now the thing you now can do. If you type $ here, you still see only the form.name thing, because it would be just too much to show everything in the list. It would get confusing as well. But now you can go there, and instead of form, you write meter 1, which is exactly the name of the column. So let's have a look here again to see that. This is meter 1, it's the name of the column. We got meter 2, meter 3, info, label, or image. And that's like how you can actually use now in the ocean from the form field. So if I select grün here, it actually says green, and I got this on the meadow. I think you understood the concept. So you can build logic without any logic. So you don't have to build complex code or conditions, because the condition is already there. If the value is blue, it's in the ocean. If it's green, it's on the meadow. So tables give you a very powerful method to do logic. And you can later on assign also the color to a frame and write the text somewhere, and also have an image in this list, and these images assigned to a frame. So there's a lot of things going on without writing a single line of code or fiddling with conditions. And this is why the select list is, beside the text box, the second most important form field mode that you permanently will need and use. The last thing I want to talk about text form fields is, and I might create another one here and just say some text. And the last thing I want to talk about is the following. So sometimes let me just put the form field in the list here. So when I go to the text box, I can write something. So a very typical scenario with business cards and other products is you only want to write something if there's something in the box. So let's say only if there's something I want to write something. And this is what you can do with text before and text after. So text before, you can, for example, say, let's do it with some typical example like the phone number. So we put phone in here and a colon, and once we are changing that to whatever a number or a text, doesn't matter, the phone appears. So if I remove all the text from my text box, then nothing appears. So if the form field is empty, the text before is not rendered. But once, in the moment there is something coming into the form field, automatically the text before and text after are outputted. So that's everything we need to know about this. It's a super simple logic. But it gives, especially in multi-line text, quite some superpower to you. Because the text before and text after could not only be text, it could also be instructions. So let's say, typical way here, we have some text afterwards. So now the problem is, if there is no number, let me remove the number here, the afterwards should be on the matter afterwards. But if there is something in, I actually want to move afterwards on the next line, which I easily can do by text after and typing in \n. So this is also in the list here. So we got a list. And say I want to insert a line break, which is \n. It's a character for line break. I can also insert tabulators or even text styles, which is even more powerful. So if I do so, in the moment I'm writing something in here, 1, 2, 3, afterwards goes down, or the entire line disappears. That's quite some logic, but built very simply with text before and text after. I will talk about using styles in text form fields in a different video about text styles, because this is more connected to text styles and would actually get a little bit too long for today's tutorial. So thanks very much for listening. I hope I could tell you something interesting and hope to see you soon.